Welcome to the Austin Music History live webcast series featuring artists, musicians, owners, and fans spanning from the 50s to 60s to present day as told by those who were there and those who are still there playing music today. Join us now from the live music capital of the world, Austin, Texas.
Welcome to Austin Music History Live. I'm your humble host and music enthusiast, Buddy Broyles, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by four amazing Austin musicians. First, we have Paul J. Fagan, who originally played with the band called Morgan and recently released an album called In It for Love, which features a plethora of Austin native musicians. Next, we have Craig D. Hillis, the one and only, who has been active in the Austin music scene since the 1960s and went on to earn a PhD in American Studies. And next, we have Mr. Mike Riemann, who is currently residing in the middle of New Mexico, was born and raised in Austin, played for years and years, and then, I quote, got the hell out. And finally, we have David Murby, who started playing for money in 1966, is a drummer and singer. He's a founding member of the band Denim, which started in 1969, the Austin All-Stars in 1974, and the Lost Austin Band in 2014. He lives in New Braunfels, Texas. Welcome, everybody.
Hello.
Hey there.
All right, let's start off with, how did you get started in this crazy music scene? Let's start with Paul Fagan.
Well, when I was but a wee teenager, I decided that I would make a career change, and I went to a local music store, which is where you went if you wanted to become a musician in those days, and I found several little 3x5 cards that were tacked up to the bulletin board where they were looking for a singer. And since I wanted to get in the music business and I didn't play an instrument, I thought, well, I guess I have to be a singer. So through that process, I actually met a couple of guys that were interested in me singing with them. And one of the guys is a guy named Richard Snyder, who was moving back to Austin to finish up at UT. And he said, if you come down to Austin, maybe we'll hook up and, find something we can do musically. So having made a career change, which meant I was unemployed and being kicked out of the house, I decided I might as well follow him down to Austin, and I did. And lo and behold, he was living in a house where a guy who was a drummer in a very successful band called the Fabulous Chevelles lived, and his name is Chuck Rogers. And through hanging out at that house, I met the rest of the band, and that at that time was Charlie Hatchett, of course, and Al Stahaley. And since they saw that I was an able-bodied guy and interested in the music business, they gave me my first job. That was as a roadie, and toting the Fabulous Chevelle equipment around Austin, many times double booked. Charlie Hatchett was the booking king. And so he would play a 5 o'clock show, and they'd leave to go get something to eat, and I had to be set up for him to play at 8 o'clock in a different venue. So anyway, I figured out there that I really would rather be a singer than a roadie. And fortunately, when they got drunk enough at the end of the night, Al would say, hey, Paul, why don't you come up here and sing a song? So literally my first money and the first time I ever sang in public was with the Fabulous Chevelles. And anyway, that led to Richard somehow getting a notice that from Craig Hillis and a guy named Rusty Keith that they were looking for people to play in a band. And so we went out and auditioned with them, and I passed because I had the longest hair. And lo and behold, within a couple of weeks, and I'm not kidding, there was fortuitously a booking agent showed up at my house looking for a place to stay. And I had extra space, so I let her stay. And lo and behold, she went out and booked us at a fraternity. I mean, right off the bat. And so we literally hit the ground running. So my first experience turned out, I just walked into a gold mine. I mean, everybody else was a real musician, and so that's how I got in the music business.
How about you, Craig?
My family, particularly my father's side of the family, have been musicians and what have you. Military family, lived in England from 58, 59 to 62 or 3. So I was in the thick of it with the basics of the British invasion. And we were able to get great records on the bass and go home and play them. And I was just enamored with the guitar, and I'll never forget hearing Please Please Me on Radio Luxembourg. And there was one of these little things you'd put in your ear because it was monaural, it wasn't a stereo sound. And I heard that, and it's the Beatles' fault. So when we got back to the States, my grandmother bought me my first guitar, and I kept plugging away after that through high school and what have you. Played in bands in high school, and took that song and dance to the University of Texas in 1967. Well, shortly thereafter, I met Paul and Rusty and a fine fellow, a pre-med student named Chuck Poffenbach. And from there, I met a lot of the singer-songwriters, and I'll leave it at that because there are other stories to be told. I think Mike is a native of Austin, which is rather rare in our scene.
Well, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so I hear. So I would have to go all the way back and give my parents credit for procreation. It was a hot, sultry, steamy night on Shoal Creek where my dad had just built a house along the creek for $10,000 on his GI Bill. In 1953, Austin was about 125,000.
Wow.
So I was born and had a great boyhood adventurous life on the creek, fishing, jumping off the dam, swimming in that thing, getting chased by water moccasins. But anyway, I was in junior high band at Lamar Junior, very poor cornet player, and I was always looking back at the drum section. It was kind of one of those buyer's remorse for buying a cornet when I really wanted to be a drummer. That was my first instrument. So in about 7th or 8th, with some paper route money, I bought an old World War II vintage set of Ludwigs, big bass drum with a calfskin head with a Hawaiian lagoon painted on the head and a light bulb that made the lagoon glitter. And I thought they were cool. They're probably worth some money. I got rid of them. Anyway, shortly after that, we moved to Missouri, where I started working as a musician. I switched over to bass. My first band was in 9th grade in Columbia, Missouri. by the name of Lemon Sour Democracy. Every band had to have some sort of 22 or so. When I realized I wanted to play as a bassist or a drummer and try to make a living at it. Dave Murby, we played in bands together. I had been following Craig Hillis's career albums. Jerry Jeff, Michael Murphy, I think, Craig.
Mm-hmm.
True.
So anyway,
Yep.
I was monitoring the Austin scene when I was living in. Got to Austin. One of my first bands actually was by the name of Alex. He was a songwriter who wrote songs for. He wrote Delta Dawn, Reuben James for the Kenny Rogers Fifth Edition. And he was living in a houseboat. This is back when Austin was bohemian and affordable. He was living in a houseboat on Bull Creek where that county line restaurant is now at 360, 2222.
Yep.
And David, there was a roadhouse there where Denham used to play a lot. And I think that's when I first probably met you. And I played there with Barrett. Buddy Miller was in the band.
Yeah, I remember that,
And
Buddy and
soon to
Julie.
be Julie Miller, who had a good amount of success in Nashville. And my last gig in Austin was with Rick Trevino, who had several #1 hits and had a Grammy Award. So his sweet spot on the tour was in New Mexico, especially the reservations. The Apache women loved him. They would rush the stage.
Sure.
It was
Wow.
great. But you know, we would fly out to Albuquerque, jump in a van, bus, car, and play all over the state. And that's where I really started to take note of New Mexico. And 4 years later, my wife Martha and I talked about getting, as I was saying, getting the hell out of Austin, and we moved to New Mexico. And now I'm looking at the Manzano Mountains and 20 acres and some longhorn steer. And I play drums once or twice a month in a little piano jazz trio in town here at an old hotel. That's my story today.
Outstanding, Michael.
Edit some of that out if you wish.
Cool.
All right, David, tell us about you.
Well, my mom started there. I learned to sing harmony sitting next to my mom in church. So I don't know how old I was, but I was encouraged to listen to all kinds of music and maybe over encouraged to perform in public. My two brothers and I, we were all fairly close in age, so we were always being called into the kitchen to sing for the company or the relatives or whoever it happened to be. So that was fun. It just came naturally to sing around our house, and my mom played me all kinds of classical music. I got familiar with, the light classics and the things that quickly evolved into loving film scores and soundtracks, because I could all go off and imagine my own little cowboy movies to whatever drama was occurring coming out of that old monaural Columbia record player. But what got me, to know that it was going to be my life, everybody my age already knows it was February 9th of 1964. I was at the back of the room watching Ed Sullivan, and I stood way back looking because I'd already seen the promo at Foley's in Houston when Capitol Records took over the little record section there, and there was already a lot of hullabaloo before the show, but everybody knows about that. And about half of my cohort will tell you the same story. That was it. Because prior to that, I was 12 years old at the time, and prior to that, my idea of what I was going to do was join the army and be a lieutenant and lead men in battle, you know. And learned to play the snare drum in junior high, so I could play all those war movie snare drum patterns. I just thought that shit was great. So you could say that John and the boys saved my life, because when
Yeah.
I saw that, everything I thought I was going to get from the military life, being a big hero from a movie, when I saw that little blurry four black and white things moving on our little Magnavox TV, it had to be a mystical thing, because it wasn't the quality of the sound or anything like that. It was just something was going on there. And from that point on, that's what, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. And people who know me from early on know how totally obsessed I was with it. And when Denim got together, a few years after that, uh, everybody in that band was like me. Our idea of what we wanted to do wasn't to go somewhere; it was to be right there doing that. We would rehearse. We didn't even call it rehearsing. We just said, "Let's go in there," because we all lived in a house, you know. But that is probably it in a nutshell. Garage bands in Houston. Uh, got together with Bill Browder in 1970. Denim had already been together a year, and we had a great guitar player, but he wanted to do a different type of music from what I had formed Denim to do. And when Bill showed up, it was Stephen Stills and Neil Young and John and Paul. Me and Bill are, to this day. I hope you get him on this show. But we very often,
Yeah.
to this day, turn to each other and go, "Shit, man, I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't met you." And it was soulmates from the get go, because we had the same attitude about music. His capabilities, I think he's a fucking genius, and the things that he does with music uh, make me very comfortable, because as long as he wants to have me around, that must mean that I've got something to offer. So there, but don't tell him I said that. So we're so
Well, that's
we
excellent.
then moved to Austin in 1971, and we were there, for about 20 years. But we met Craig. He was our booking agent, and then our producer, and best friends all along the way. Same with my tribe. And I just got to know Paul recently. It turns out you were there all along.
Yeah, I was. Isn't, isn't that
So, Dave,
Unbelievable.
spooky? You know?
Say what?
uh, I first met Paul many, many years later, but it was the Denim Band, right, Paul, that played on your album
Just darn
CD.
near. Yes,
Yep.
yeah. It was
I mean,
Bill.
si-
The bassist was Eddie Cantu and Mike and Bill Browder, and
Mm-hmm.
and Craig, that was the foursome that started out in the studio, and
Mm-hmm.
interestingly or scarily enough, to kind of help everybody know where to go, I was standing in the control room behind Leighton Japenny, with his monitor speakers blaring, and he just put a microphone in there. So I'm just basically thinking, well, I just have to let them know where the chorus is and what's going on. It turned out he used more than half of that on the CD, which worked out great because these guys are so good. Every time they did a take, it was so good it didn't matter, where my vocal, which take it was, because they were always right on.
Well,
It was truly a mystical experience for me. We the people that play on that album is, it's really a who's who of Austin music history.
mm-hmm.
Well, let's do a deeper dive there. You've all played at a range of venues in Austin and played with a number of people. Let's share with our audience some of the great venues that aren't there now, but were, and the names that you played with at those venues. Who wants to take the lead?
Me.
Go
Hit
for
it.
it.
Me. The Armadillo World headquarters
Yeah.
was, something. It was another one of those things that just could only happen in Austin at the time that they did. But Denim, we debuted our first Epic album there. We did numerous benefits for the Armadillo, before anybody else in Austin would give us a gig. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was the real thing. We opened for Cheech and Chong there, and we
All
opened
right.
for and a couple of other uh, uh, odd bands. I think there was a British trio named Triumph or something. I can't remember now, but they
Mm-hmm.
were fun to open for because we ruled the Armadillo at a certain point in time. So yeah, that's my vote.
Well,
I have a
a little.
I
poster
said
in my
bingo for you, Craig.
I have a poster in my office of an armadillo show that Denham did. Denham being at that point David Murphy, Bill Browder, Richard Mullen, God bless his talented soul, and Jerry. Jerry's last name
Crow,
is,
Crow,
thank you,
Crow.
Jerry Crow. Jerry Crow and his very talented brother Jack Crow. They didn't play in the same band, but anyhow, opening was Jimmy Vaughn, and there were just so many juxtapositions of things. I actually have in one of my scrapbooks a an ad, the New Orleans Club. And I bring this up because I want to get us back into the Austin scene, into the clubs, and the efficacy of playing, with different bands and with each other. But it was a band I played in '69 called the Eternal Life Corporation. Charlie Cobb, Trisha
Mm-hmm.
Johns, Mike Jackson, the great drummer Michael Christian, and Don on keyboards. Well, the Eternal Life Corporation at the New Orleans Club opening ZZ Top.
The
I
times. Yeah.
I have the evidence,
A
but let me
Oh,
beardless
just
that's.
ZZ Top.
yeah, a
Oh,
beardless
oh yeah.
ZZ Top.
Beardless.
So let me throw that out there
Absolutely.
to the guys and let them see, let them yak and quack about wild and crazy times in clubs and the camaraderie of band playing.
Well, I remember a
Um,
club
yeah, go
called
ahead.
called the Vulcan Gas Company,
Yeah.
and it was the first kind of psychedelic club I ever went in. Uh, I had to be all of 19, I guess, and they did this oil and kind of paint deal, where they all they really had was an overhead projector, but they put this on there and it just sloshed around. Man, it made these cool colors, and man, everybody just went crazy. Well, I met a guy there who was a little bit different than some of the other people, and he lived upstairs. And it turned out it was this guy that drew armadillos, and his name was Jim Franklin. And so that whole experience to a guy, who just kind of moved from a little tiny college station, man, you talk about expanding one's mind. Jim Franklin's a pretty interesting character. Anyway, so the Vulcan, I remember that place. I remember when the Jade Room was transitioning from kind of a German beer garden to letting hippies play there. I remember all these bands that were coming from Lubbock, the Sparkles. I remember the Chessmen, Felicity, coming
Mm-hmm.
down from Dallas, coming up from Houston, or moving sidewalks. By then, Roy Head, was too big to be competition to us. But Neil Ford and the Fanatics, I think, were a Houston band, that were doing a lot. But there were hardly any places to play, as I remember. There were, the Vulcan went away, and I always thought the Vulcan was kind of the father of the armadillo. I don't
It
know
was.
whether, yeah. And there was another place up north of Lamar called the Action Club that
Mm-hmm.
that we played. But we played fraternities, we played private parties. Uh, you know, we played a couple of really seminal Austin events. Austin was just kind of starting to be a rock and roll town, and we got to play at Gregory Gym, and we played the big gig at Woolridge Park. And uh, so I mean, it was really interesting how much music was going on with really how few clubs there were to support it in Austin at the time.
May I interject? And
Please.
I would like to ask Mike and David and Paul, of course, what was it about Austin? What was it about geography, demographics, you name it, the music scene? I got here in '67, but my gosh, it was like no other place I've ever been. And Mike, you're the native. Please talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I'll relate a quick little anecdote. My father worked at the state health department as a psychiatric social worker at 45th and Lamar. And on occasion, Friday evening after work to unwind a little bit before having to deal with all of us, he'd stop at Kenneth Threadgill's little gas station up on Lamar. And my dad would tell us about this amazing folk singer who went to UT, a young woman. She sang folk and played an auto harp. This was about 64. Turned out to be Janis Joplin before she headed out to San Francisco. That was interesting. Also, my almost next door neighbor, a little boyhood friend of mine, was a guy named Billy Wilmot, who played organ in a band called The Wig, and they would rehearse
Oh
in the
yeah.
garage, and I would go over and listen to them. And Rusty Weir was playing drums and singing. Billy, I'm not sure who else was in that band. They were one of the, seminal Austin bands of their day. And then, of course, we moved away, and I was up in the Midwest for 10 years. But every summer, when I got to be of driving age, Buddy and I would drive down to Austin, crash out on Lake Austin at City Park, and then go drive in. And didn't matter whoever was playing at the Armadillo that night. You know, it was Doug Sum, it was Willie, then it would be Chick Corea the next night. So,
Yeah.
and I was monitoring that whole burgeoning country rock scene, you know, Craig, David Murby, you know, Denham. I bought your albums up in the Midwest, Jerry Jeff, and just thought it was just a great kind of music, you know, rock and country. And finally got back down in '78 and played the Back Room.
Hmm. That's, I think,
Mm-hmm.
where I first met you.
Exactly, with Patterson Barrett. Played Liberty
Right.
Lunch with Your Move,
Hmm.
opening for
Yeah.
Poco. Dave Murby was the drummer and singer in that band for a while. That was the time that at Liberty Lunch, when Poco got pissed off because they didn't like the monitors. And after starting about an hour late, they played 4 songs and said goodnight. We had opened for them, a band called Your
Oh
Move,
boy.
Mike Jackson,
Yeah.
Larry Viegas, David Murby, a cast of 100 drummers. They sort of imploded like Spinal Tap, except for David, of course. But anyway, so we little opening set, kind of a lukewarm response, but that's to be expected. Poco played 5 songs and left the stage and jumped in their bus. And the bus tried to drive off, and the crowd, when they realized what was going on, started pelting Poco's bus with Lone Star beer bottles, you
Oh
know,
boy.
booing. And
There's a
it
variety.
Welcome to
that was a
Texas.
memorable gig. But probably memorable gigs for me later was Willie's 4th of July picnic. Played a couple of those, and then I played Farm Aid up in New York
Oh
City with
boy.
a lady artist, and that was really neat. So this thing
Mhm.
about the musical profession, as David was relating his childhood aspirations of leading men into a charge,
Yeah.
you know, over enemy lines. I mean, that's what we do. We're in the trenches.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
Some pretty gritty
there's a
gigs.
lot of parallels that really do the trick for me. You know, that's how they can get young men to go off to war. Is there's a defined goal. You know, for us early on, it was to get through Gloria without fucking up the song. But once you got to where you could, you know, that you reach a point where you feel that synergy, and it's camaraderie, it's esprit de corps, and but it's nonviolent. You know, it's got a lot of
Mhm.
passion. It's
Well,
got
most of the
equipment.
time.
It's got gear. You know, a lot of guys get into guns and tack gear. We get into guitars. You know, I'm a guitar. Uh, you know, I love guitar. I'm a pinup fan of guitars, even though I can't get through Gloria. You know, the joke for your listening public is it's a one chord song, and we all loved it in our first 13-year-old, 14-year-old garage bands wherever we were. What was your first song that you could get through? Mine was Gloria, obviously.
I'll tell you mine. I was at first a drummer. Uh, had to play "Fire" by Jimi Hendrix.
Oh my
Whoa.
God.
Ooh.
It
Oh,
was kind of a
I
tall
was a
order for a.
seasoned vet before I tried that shit. Right on,
Well,
man.
Yeah,
I
that's
completely butchered it, you know, but it was a high bar. Mitch Mitchell, right?
No
oh
shit.
my
Right.
God,
Yeah, I
yeah.
loved his stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
The song I
I was,
recall.
what about you, Craig? What was the first rock and roll garage band tune you mastered?
Well, I can't remember, but uh, I remember picking out melodies on the strings of a guitar that my grandmother gave me in very early 60s out there, you know, when the deep purple falls over
All right.
sleepy garden walls. But what's more interesting to me is Given First is the first time I saw you, David Murby, at the old Saxon pub on 34th and
Yeah.
in a regional. I walked
Yeah.
in there and I thought Paul, he was Chuck Poffenbach. He had this long hair, he looked like Poffenbach, but it was David Murby and it was Denim. And I fell in love with that band right then and there. That had to be the early 70s. Tell
Yeah.
the
What
folks a
was
little bit
Doug's
about
name?
that period. Huh?
Well, what was Doug's last name? The guy that ran the place at the time?
Oh,
That
well, the
old
guy
ape
that
name?
Now, I don't know that, but I do know that the guy that owned it at the time was named Richard Phillip,
Okay.
who has gone on to be quite an operator in the real estate business. Very brief aside, Peanut, my wife and I, we're in Houston. She's doing a title, as in land title. She's a land title examiner and she does a lot of real estate stuff. So she and I are down there, and she and her partner Carol, with their research company, they put me out in front in this big convention thing, and have me play guitar to draw people. Well, I don't know if I drew many people. I might have scared some off, but this guy comes up and said, "You from Austin?" And I said, "Yes." And I said, "What about you?" Well, I was there. And he said, "Have you ever heard of the Saxon Pub?" And I said, "Yeah, I started it. I opened the Saxon Pub in 1990." And he said, "Bullshit. I opened it in 1972." He was the original owner that I stole the name and the idea from, because when I opened the Saxon Pub in 1990 on South Lamar there, I was patterning it after that vibe we had at the Saxon Pub. I patterned it
Yes.
after that vibe I felt
That's true.
meeting
Yeah.
you and Dave and Bill and Richard and Jerry Crow. I just was enamored with the excellence of your presentation and your music, because it was a composite of the great singer songwriters I was blessed to know at an early age, and the rock edge. So your turn, David. Tell me about all that.
Well, Denham moved to Austin largely because that's where the gigs were.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't experience Austin as we came to experience it until we got there. Mostly we were going to Austin to play gigs that Charlie Hatchett got for us while we were still
Mm-hmm.
living in Houston. So we moved to Austin. We all got a house together like we did in Houston, and the Saxon Pub was a walking distance away. So we went in there, and I think I got a job washing dishes there and watching bands. And they gave us a shot at this kind of precursor jam night. It wasn't like the Austin All Stars, but it was bands would come in and set up and do a little half-hour set. And we did a couple of those for free, and I'm sure that's when you saw us. But it was
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. I fell in love with Ewing Street Times there. John Bandiver and Shake Russell and two other fellas whose names I can't remember, but they would play.
Michael Matchkiss, and Burns, a guy named Billy. We called him Burns because he had big sideburns. For the historical
Uh,
record, back to you, David.
well, they blew me away because of the way we loved them because of the way they would switch around instruments and do another song, and it was at
Mm-hmm.
a time when it wasn't as mock show as it later became on Sixth Street. It
Mm-hmm.
was these were guys. Here's our stuff. It was all originals, So it was really unique in that sense, the way a certain other Saxon pub is to this day. That
Hmm.
I ain't lying when I say it's the best place to play in Austin. Maybe it's not the best place to go see bands, although I think it is, but it's certainly the best place if you're in a band to go perform because of just the sound that you get coming back at you.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
proppers to Richard Vanoy, who's been the Scotty there for 100 years, and it's always
I know.
wonderful to continue to play there. That's where I don't know about other spots because I haven't played in a lot of other spots lately, but I sure remember the Alamo Roadhouse that
Hmm.
Mike was mentioning earlier.
Okay, yeah.
And yeah, and I didn't experience Hill on the Moon the way like Leighton DePenning talks about that complex
Hmm.
that was music oriented. But I know
City
wasn't
Park
that
Road.
near where Soap Creek was?
City Park
Uh
Road.
huh. Yeah.
No, actually,
Up in,
Hill of the Moon
no,
is exactly Hill of the. Oh no, Mike is entirely right. It was on City Park Road, uh,
Mhm.
and you wound down and on the way to ski shores, as you might remember.
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
sure did.
given that time period, I would like to know, you and Mike have a lot of bands in common. And I want to hear more about that. I want to hear more about where you guys played together and did the hoochie coochie and the turnaround.
Well, let's see. We did that
It
old
was
hoochie
back in
coochie every night. Yeah.
'78.
Yeah. Um, as I said, I'm not sure did you ever play bass with Patterson and Rick Stein and that tribe at the back
So,
room?
so yes, I
Because I
started
think
as
that's the first time I played with you.
started as partners in crime as their drummer,
Right,
and
right. I
then
Mm,
saw you
the
do
bass
that.
player quit, and then I moved over to bass, and then Buddy Miller and Julie Miller came in. I think Ben Cock was in the band,
I think he
Lynn
was
Paraffin, but I think I first started playing with you on 6th Street at Toulouse, and
with your
I
move.
was just no, it was pre your move, maybe Patterson Barrett and Rick Stein, as you're saying. But
It could have been Ricky.
so
Yeah, Rick.
from that, whatever band I was playing with, whenever we needed a drummer, I would always think of you because you're rock solid. You sang, you're good hang, and you make your own clothes.
oh,
The
good
Ah,
grief.
trifecta.
we
So, Dave,
Mike and
you and
I.
I were often down on the U.S. Mexico border in Laredo playing with these
Yep.
two great guys who grew up in Laredo, Mike Jackson, T-Bird Jackson, Larry Villegas. And that was just a rip roaring fun time down there back
Oh,
before it got all complicated. We'd go across
some
the
of those
border after the
island
gig and
gigs. Yeah, we did some of those island gigs too. The over on Port A
Cooper's
or on the island.
Valley
Yeah, that's when oh uh, Freddie Fender's daughter or
flipped out.
yeah, she came up and
He
started
freaked out.
hassling you guys. Yeah, because
Mike Jackson and I,
T-Bird did such
being
a
the
great imitation of Freddie Fender, and she was in there one night and it pissed her off badly, but
what
I
happened was
enjoyed it.
she was really inebriated, and Mike Jackson and I, being the gentleman that we were, offered her a ride home to the Freddie Fender trailer compound, and I think it was maybe it was Port Aransas. I don't know. I can't
Yeah,
remember.
it was Port A
Anyway,
for that gig.
so we let her out of the car, and we watched her. Being the gentleman, watched her get to the door. She was having a terrible time with her door key, and then next thing we knew, we heard the shattering of glass, and she had broken her fist through the Freddie Fender's daughter through the glass of the door to get in. And the rest of the trailer park, all the lights came on, and Mike and I looked like the heavies, you know. But a lot of those good times. And to
Well,
go
real
on
quick,
the chronology of David Murby and I, uh, we went on to play in Duck Soup, which was a strange anomaly of a band. We played at a place called Anchovies, and the leader of the band kind of stole some of the All-Star guys from Craig's Steamboat Monday night, that incredible night you had with the All-Stars. And the Anchovies took off, but the crowd was more like Republican senators
Realtors,
and
golfer
their call
developers.
realtors, golfers, their call girls. There was a lot of ecstasy being consumed, I recall. It was a popular little spot for all the wrong reasons, but it was a great little paycheck down 6th Street.
It,
Ah,
it was probably player for player the best musicians that I had ever been honored to perform with. I'm the Riley Osborne on keyboards and John Mills on
John Mills,
saxes, and who wrote the charts for the rest of them. Kent Winking, and then John
Blondell.
Blondell on
Are you kidding? Yeah.
trombone, respectively. Uh,
Ooh.
T-Bird Jackson,
just and T-Bird
Bill
Jackson,
Browder.
Bill Browder, and then
Yeah.
Eddie Cantu came along as
Eddie
drummer,
Cantu.
and then you as the best bass player I ever worked with, ever.
here, here, here,
Ah,
here.
please, thank you.
Buddy, I notice on our little message thingy dingy here that someone, some kind person, Vincent Bosquez, anything about Soap Creek Saloon? David, chime in on that one. I certainly
I,
am
I
familiar, but you and Mike, Paul, what?
well, that was just one of the places Denham played a lot, was Soap Creek.
Yeah,
But they did a reunion not too long ago.
yeah.
A tribute to it. What about you, Paul?
I never played at Soap Creek. Had a good friend who played there, but I never played at Soap Creek.
I thought that Soap Creek was a wonderful creative alternative to the Armadillo headquarters. It was a great little roadhouse off B Caves Road, and I found that in Austin, different scenes and different bands and different types of people uh, work together and blend together in different venues. Soap Creek was strong into Doug Somm and his people, and it was strong into Stevie Ray and a lot of the blues stuff. They did a great job of rolling a lot of that great music out
Greasy
during
Wheels
the
did a lot of.
70s. Oh, thank you for reminding me. Oh, very, very much so. They were a staple there. Mike, do you have any Soap Creek memories?
So I only heard some great bands there. I never played at the original, but the later incarnation way up north, Soap Creek
Oh, yes.
moved into
Mhm.
a venue that was a famous old venue that had the distinction of being Hank Williams' very
Last
last
gig.
gig. And
The
also Johnny Horton.
Skyline, Johnny
Thank
Horton,
you.
Skyline, wasn't it?
You're correct.
I
So I
believe it was
played there,
Skyline.
and oddly enough, Hank Williams and Johnny Horton both shared the same wife, not at the same time, and both played their last gig there before accidents and other,
Huh.
Mm.
ways to go. So I played there. But just the idea that Soap Creek was in the middle of Westlake Hills kind of blows me away. If you look at Westlake Hills now, right?
Mm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
It's a different place.
it is indeed.
Let's talk about
David,
the. Oh, go
did
ahead.
you ever play a gig where you didn't have monitors
All the
from a
time.
PA?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah. It
Yeah,
depended, I
it's
mean,
hard for
depending on,
people today. It's hard for
yeah.
people today to even envision that.
Well,
How
the
did you
Beatles
do
played
that?
Shea Stadium without monitors,
That's
Yeah.
and
right.
it showed.
It,
Yeah.
Well,
that
at
reminds
Shea
me.
Stadium, it did.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
David Murby. Speaking of monitors, who taught me to put an earplug in one ear, and you could hear your falsetto, and it was like a primitive in-ear monitor, just a little foam
Yeah.
rubber earplug, and I learned that from Dave Murby.
Well,
Ta-da!
David taught me the same thing, but the first time I tried it, I could hear myself sing, and I said, "Well, that's the last of that. Forget that
I used to
shit."
always wear I would wear my earplugs when you were singing, Craig.
You've always been a wise man, Mike Reman. A wise man are you?
Got a smart ass.
I was
Oh, I
noticing
love
on
it.
the feed somebody asked about PAs. What was the standard PA? And I know what it was a Bogan 50 watt and
Yeah.
Shure
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
microphones. And if you were in
Yeah.
Houston or lucky enough to get them, they were those Allen speakers. Otherwise, they
Oh,
were just
yeah.
the
Yeah.
Shures. But over
Now
Yeah.
you
time,
can't forget the Shure Vocal Master.
Yeah.
well, that
Indeed.
was it had a
Remember
lot
those
more notes.
long, tall?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Now
We
it
were
was the
lucky.
What were
We
you going to
had
say,
oh,
Mike?
two Altec Lansings, the big silver
yeah,
cones.
Yeah.
nice.
And
Mm-hmm.
we powered it with a Fender Twin,
There you go.
and all
Mm-hmm.
set just as clean as you could get it. Boy, that thing honked, but no
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of
monitor.
the Shure
No
Vocal
monitor.
Master PA.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of the Shure Vocal Master, really beautiful design, right? Chrome and but anyway, if
Oh
you're
yeah,
one of the big and loud bands in Austin and you're playing gigs and making some cash, like Bubble Puppy
Mm-hmm.
as an example,
Yep.
each member of the band had their own Shure Vocal Master PA. So that was 100 watts per member.
That's
And so,
Woo!
you could put
that's
out some
right.
dBs fairly cleanly and, before modern sound reinforcement. That was
Right
that was
on.
top of the line.
That is very
Yeah.
true. I remember that
The,
well, and let me put in a little plug for my friend David Four. David Four, the drummer for Bubble Puppy, has been doing this wonderful writing thing on Substack, and he publishes periodically on Substack to underscore that again. Great Bubble Puppy stories. So any Bubble Puppy fans should go to David Four in Substack.
I just remember hearing it on the radio on KNOW with Mike Lucas, the rock and roll DJ, who later became
Absolutely,
one of my band's managers. But
absolutely.
Hot Smoking Sassafras
That's
yes,
came
right.
on, and they were playing double leads about
uh
seven
huh,
years before the Allman Brothers, and that
Oh,
just blew my mind
absolutely.
how great that song was. It was prog rock,
Mm-hmm.
60 what 7?
yeah.
67, 68. Yeah,
I,
yeah. It was in the aftermath.
Potter.
Well, I don't want to say aftermath, but they signed with international artists in Houston, and Rocky Erickson. Then the Puppy came. I'd give it 69.
I think
Todd
that's
Potter.
probably right.
Hello, Todd.
Mhm. Hello, Todd. And
Also
you want to
played
hear
the
something?
Chevelles.
Absolutely. You want to hear a really weird one? After Bubble Puppy broke up, and I was in Colorado playing with Stephen Fromholtz, we put a band together called Captain Duck and the Farmers Electric Co-op Boys. You can't make that stupid shit up. You just
But
can't
you
make that.
did.
Uh-uh. Well, Stephen
Somehow.
did. As we used to say, it's Fromholtz's fault. But we
Yeah.
had called Captain Duck and Farmers Electric, and it was me and Fromholtz and Travis Holland, and get this on drums, David Four from the Bubble Puppy.
Ah. And Craig, I have you to thank for getting me in on a few gigs with From Holes with you, and maybe it's just the three of us. Early new
Oh yeah.
millennium. I was
Oh
quite
well,
honored.
Michael.
The,
I
the
would.
poet laureate of Texas.
Yeah. Well, I'm quite honored to play on any stage with you. You're my favorite bass player. So there you have it. And I'm
Thank
pissed that
you.
you're in central Mexico or New Mexico taking pictures of birds instead of playing music with us.
Yeah. Well, come book something in Kirky, Albuquerque, and I'll come play with you.
Okay, I'm on it.
And we got plenty of room for all you guys. Come stay.
Outstanding.
Take you up on it.
We'll have some legal cannabis gummies and climb through Goat Canyon.
Sounds
Oh
good to
Oh,
me,
boy.
man.
So we have a question. We have several questions. I want to thank our people who are joining us online. We've got Rusty
great.
Keith. I see Jen Atkins has asked questions. Vincent
Oh,
Vasquez, who I know personally, great guy. Atkins had a question about the Mohawk. Was the Mohawk around back then? Did y'all have experience with the Mohawk?
I think
I
that was
don't.
before Denham got here.
Must have been. Yeah. I'm sorry. I do not.
What about the
I
Id
see.
Coffee House?
Oh, heavens, yes. If I'm not mistaken, the Id Coffee House was in and around during the folk music in the 60s when 11th Door was on Red River. Was in and around that time. The Id Coffee House had folk acts, and I'm not as familiar with the Id Coffee House as I am with the 11th Door. The 11th Door, oh, kind of Red Riverish and 12th or 10th or 9th Street featured Alan Dameron, who ran the talent there, Jerry Jeff Walker and Dal Patterson and Carolyn Hester. It was a precursor to uh, the checkered flag. And
Okay.
it might be one of the, when Jerry Jeff was playing there and around that time, staying with Alan Dameron down the street, he wrote Mr. Bojangles, according to one historical account.
Oh,
So
really?
the id was, oh yeah, so the id was in and around, if not a precursor to that.
Okay. Well, the checkered flag was around in the late 60s,
Yes,
maybe
yes,
69, 68, something like that.
thereabouts. Opened by Rod Kennedy and Alan Dameron.
Oh,
As a
yeah.
matter of fact, I was reading the other day that Rod Kennedy was offered a deal to buy the 11th door, but he went ahead and got a lease at 15th and Lavaca and opened the checkered flag. Rod Kennedy was a big racing enthusiast, and
Yeah.
hence the name checkered flag. And he would uh, Read Rod Kennedy's book. It's quite good. But he was a folk aficionado during those years. He was intimately involved with Aquafest and a lot of the talent acquisition in those years. And in, oh gosh, 66, 67, thereabouts, Paul, he opened the checkered flag, and it lasted 4 or 5 years. That's where I met Stephen Fromholtz. Jerry Jeff played there a lot. Willis Allen Ramsey was an early player, and Big Bill Moss, Carolyn Hester, so forth and so on. But I'm rambling,
Yeah.
so someone else take over.
Did that become Castle Creek? Same building?
Affirmative.
Yeah.
15th and Levant?
Yes.
Yeah, because
Yes.
see, I saw God, Michael McGarry and Michael Christian. What was the name of that band? Falcone.
Strawberry Shoemaker.
Balcony's fault. Well,
They
yeah,
were
you're both right.
So I remember Strawberry Shoemaker, which was Mike Christian's band, and a really good jazz guitar player from Austin, McCallum High School. Forget his name.
Jim Minks?
Ming.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, disclosure, Mike Christian, my sister and Mike Christian were kind of an item at McCallum. So
Holy moly.
Mike would drive my sister Janice home after school, and when I would hear that VW coming up Strass Drive, I mean, I idolized Mike as a drummer, got to play with him later. But as soon as
Me
I
too.
heard the VW drive up our driveway, I would jump on my drums and play obnoxiously loud so he would notice me, as if he would with my sister in the car, right? So,
Right.
Oh yeah.
and so
Oh yeah.
many
and again,
decades
and
later, Mike played in some of my bands, and he was,
Hmm.
if he didn't know the song, his feel was so innate and just so good that it didn't matter. He was that good.
Yeah.
And a great
Yeah.
singer. Hi, Mike.
Wow.
and David, you're right about Balcony. That was Mike Riemann and Jack Jacobs and, oh my goodness, Michael McGarry and a number of different
Riley.
incredibly talented people.
Well, gentlemen, we're almost out of time. I want to field one more question from Vincent Vasquez about, and you all have stories about this, about musicians coming from all over to get to Austin to play music, specifically about DFW musicians. I know you have some stories about popular bands that migrated from Dallas in this area to play in Austin, and I want to get your thoughts on that, and we'll wrap up the show after that.
Cowboy Twinkies.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
Led by,
Ray
Ray
Wiley Hubbard.
yes, yeah,
Wiley Hubbard. Mhm.
Hubbard.
Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Stevie, Jimmy. I remember first Jimmy and the Chessmen. I mentioned Felicity. That was a DFW based band. Some of the guys went on to some notoriety.
Yeah,
There was
wasn't that Don Henley with
yes,
Eagles?
Don Henley
He
played in
CST.
that band, and famous, got real famous when he started playing with the Eagles. I met a couple of guys that made a big splash in all of Texas when I was up in Dallas. Two brothers were playing with a drummer, and it was Dusty Hill and his brother who was playing guitar, and Frank Beard.
Uh-oh.
And it just so happened that when I went up to stay with my parents one summer, a guy that I knew from Austin was friends with these guys. And so they were playing at that time in a band called the American Blues. And that dyed their hair blue, and
Oh
at
my
that
God.
time, yeah, and they were, as you can imagine, pretty wild characters. And through the deal, Frank gave me $30, and if anybody knows Frank or he's listening, I still have that $30, Frank. I didn't spend it. So, and of course, for those people that don't recognize those names, the other guy that they teamed up with is named Billy Gibbons, and they formed that little old band from Texas called ZZ Top.
Is it kind of weird that the only guy in that band without a beard is Frank Beard?
It really is, isn't it?
I never thought
Yeah,
about that. Yeah.
All right. Well,
yeah.
final
Stuff that
question.
keeps me awake at night, you know?
Imagine so. Final question for everybody.
Well,
Oh, go ahead. Go
yes,
ahead,
sir.
Paul.
Well, there was one question that was lingering, and it was about an infamous block party. And I know Craig knows exactly what that was. Uh, what are your recollections of that event, Craig?
Paul and I were playing in the band called Morgan, and I'll make this quick. In the late 60s, there were a lot of block parties, where people would set up an ad hoc stage and the band would bring its PA and we would play. And they were like neighborhood cluster whatevers. And so we were playing at one of those. And I remember my friend John Baker, he and other friends were handing out little tablets of cosmic significance.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, yeah. And so we cosmic significance and went about playing our set. And then what happened, Paul?
Well, we were actually playing at this moment, and the song we were getting ready to play was Born to Be Wild. And Craig Hillis looked out at the throng of people and said, I'm going to make your ears bleed. And he turned up to an appropriate volume, and we started that song. And lo and behold, just about the time the second verse started, this car comes barreling down the road and literally plows into this crowd of people, and it ends up stopping right next to where we're playing. And the reason it stopped was the mass of humanity was greater than the horsepower of that car. And I mean, it was a horrendous scene, coupled with the fact that we were all sunshined up, so to speak. But a whole lot of people went to the hospital, and the thing that resonates to me in this day, of course, everybody just jumped on the car and started beating, trying to get through the windshield and everything. And a guy jumped up on top of that car and just screamed, "Stop! We are not like this." And everybody just started backing up away from the car. Of course, the place was crawling with police, and they came in, cuffed the guys, and took them off. Fortunately, nobody died, but I think about 20 or 25 people ended up being carted off to the hospital. So, anytime I hear two things, I'm going to make your ears bleed, or the beginning of Born to Be Wild, I can't
Mhm.
help but being taken back to that night, and just the carnage. I mean, of course, that was the end of the party, but
On that
it was,
cheery note.
yeah. On that
Well,
cheery note, everybody just went on home.
Woo!
holy moly. Holy moly. So that's why when you hear Born to Be Wild or I make you, that's why you take acid.
Well, you know, Craig, they since that time they've actually made that illegal.
Oh, I
So
didn't realize that. Oh,
if
oh
I
dear.
wanted to
But
do that, I'd have to go stay where Mike is.
but
Or,
now the rage in the psychoanalysis field is microdoses of LSD for people with PTSD, addiction, depression.
Mhm.
So
So I
it's
hear.
coming back, guys. Let's get that block party.
all
Oh
right,
no!
all right.
So I think a great way to
I
end
think
this. Go ahead.
the operative word there is micro. We
Agreed.
were into max, not
I
micro.
want to. I want to hear something from David. David, what are your thoughts about this little session? I look at you in your lime green backdrop. Talk to me.
This session here, what we've done tonight, what
Yeah,
session was my thoughts? Boy,
yeah.
well, we've run out of time, man. My thoughts, I don't have any short thoughts, but I did notice that there was a final question. Uh, why do you play music in one sentence? I didn't
Okay.
That's
answer
the
first
question.
because
Hit
they
it,
let
Dave.
me.
Because what?
I just did because they let me.
Ah.
And I will
You,
add,
you know,
Wonderful,
because
Dave.
because people will because I've got the finest tribe of brothers and sisters in the world to make music with, and that's why I Jones for it. I'm addicted.
beats working.
I think that's the true definition of a musician, one who is addicted to music. And
Hmm.
we actually had a little conversation, kind of a long conversation, about the uh, what happens when people play music together and what getting in the groove is. And you know, lo and behold, science has answered that question by hooking up people to EKG machines and looking at their brain waves and saying when people play together, their brains start resonating on that dominant frequency. And soon after that, their neurons are actually firing in sync. So there is not only a subjective, boy, this sure feels good doing this music thing. You know, science has helped us out there. They've proved something we've felt for the last 50 years. There really is a feeling that goes along with this.
Mhm.
All right. Well, gentlemen, I think we're out of time here. And Craig, you had a final thought?
Oh no,
All
no.
right. Well, I really want to thank everybody for joining us. We had a terrific offsite audience, lots of great questions. We want to encourage everybody to like and subscribe to all of our social media because that's where you can find more content like that. And I hope you'll watch for the next show to air. We plan them as they need to happen, which is hopefully soon. But again, I want to give a great thanks to those who joined us today, Pog Fagan, Craig Hillis, of course, Mike Riemann, and David Murby. Great conversation, gentlemen. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you,
Thanks,
buddy.
buddy.
Enjoyed it.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you
you.
Thank you,
so much.
everybody. It was a good show, and we'll see y'all next time.
All right. Good night.